If you have ever been inside a climate-controlled underground storage facility after hours, you know the suffocating weight of the air down there. It isn't just cold, it is stale, preserved, and completely devoid of life. It feels like standing at the bottom of a dry concrete well beneath the bustling surface of the city, surrounded by hundreds of identical corrugated steel roll-up doors painted industrial orange. They stretch down long, windowless corridors in every direction, sealing away decades of unwanted memories, broken heirlooms, and forgotten lives. There are no windows, no natural light, and the overhead fluorescent tubes hum with a low, hypnotic buzz that slowly vibrates in the back of your skull until you lose all sense of time and direction. My name is Marcus. Last November, I rented Unit 404 at a self-storage complex tucked away in suburban Philadelphia. The facility was built 2 levels below street level, repurposed from the subterranean basement of an abandoned 1970s commercial laundry plant. My lease gave me 24-hour keypad access, which was the only reason I chose it. I was clearing out my late uncle's estate. Dozens of heavy cardboard wardrobe boxes filled with old clothes, yellowed legal paperwork, rusted shop tools, and bulky antique furniture that I had nowhere to store in my small 4th-floor apartment. It was 11:35 p.m. on a freezing Tuesday night. I was alone on basement level 2, sitting on an overturned wooden crate inside Unit 404, taping up the last box of glass kitchenware. The silence down there was total. Every 10 minutes or so, the facility's central ventilation system would kick on with a deep, mechanical groan, blowing a gust of dry, dusty air through the corridor grates before abruptly cutting out again, leaving behind an even heavier, dead stillness. At 11:55 p.m., a sharp, metallic clang rattled through the concrete corridor. It was the unmistakable sound of the heavy, motorized steel security shutter at the main loading dock gate closing for the night. I stopped my tape dispenser mid-pull and checked my watch. The facility manager had assured me when I signed the lease that the main gate stayed open until midnight, but the automatic timer must have been running 5 minutes fast. I wasn't entirely trapped. There was a small manual emergency exit door located near the stairwell at the end of the central spine. But I knew once that main shutter went down, the facility switched to its automated overnight security protocol. I stood up, wiped the gray dust from my jeans, and pulled down the orange steel door of Unit 404. It rattled noisily against its metal tracks before hitting the concrete floor with a dull thud. I slid the heavy brass padlock into the latch, clicked it shut, and shoved the key into my front pocket. I pulled out my smartphone to turn on the flashlight app for the long walk back through the maze of hallways. As soon as the screen lit up, the battery icon flashed a red warning, 1%. Before I could swipe open the control panel, the screen flickered violently, glitched into a bar of static, and went completely black. Great. Fantastic timing, I muttered into the empty room, my voice flat. I clipped my car keys to my belt loop, relying on the faint, buzz-humming overhead fluorescent lights to guide me down Corridor D toward the central loading bay stairs. The hallway was a straight line of gray concrete floors and orange steel doors. But as I reached the junction and turned the corner onto Corridor C, the overhead lights didn't just flicker. They began shutting off in a slow, deliberate, cascading sequence. Section by section, the ceiling tubes died, plunging the far end of the hallway into pitch blackness. The shadows moved toward me like a rising tide, swallowing the orange doors one by one, driving the darkness straight toward where I was standing. I stopped dead in my tracks. The ambient light around me dropped to a dim, sickly yellow, cast by a single flickering emergency tube located 50 feet behind me. That was when the silence was shattered by a sound that made no logical sense. It was a sharp, loud, mechanical chime, the distinct, high-pitched double ring of an old rotary landline telephone. It echoed off the raw concrete walls, sounding impossibly crisp and loud in the subterranean stillness. I froze, my heart taking a hard, heavy leap into my throat. A landline telephone 40 feet underground in a self-storage facility made 0 sense. Storage companies don't run telephone wiring to individual storage bays, and certainly not to units buried 2 floors below the earth. The sound was coming from Corridor B, just around the concrete pillar to my left. I stood motionless for several seconds, every instinct in my body screaming at me to walk away, to find the emergency exit stairs and get out into the cold night air. But curiosity is an insidious thing when mixed with fatigue and adrenaline. I stepped slowly toward the corner, the thick rubber soles of my sneakers squeaking softly against the polished concrete floor. I leaned my shoulder against the cold concrete pillar and peered around into Corridor B. Halfway down the hall, beneath a dying fluorescent fixture, the orange steel door of Unit 312 was rolled up about 3 feet off the ground, leaving a dark, gaping gap along the floor. Inside the pitch-black opening of that unit, resting on top of a dusty metal office desk under a thick blanket of cobwebs, was a faded beige 1980s telephone. Its small red plastic indicator light was flashing in perfect sync with the chime. The sound vibrated through the floorboards. I stood there, my pulse hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I should have turned around. I should have sprinted down Corridor D to the emergency door. But the sheer bizarre impossibility of a ringing vintage phone in an abandoned, sealed subterranean basement kept my feet glued to the floorboards. Driven by a strange, numb momentum, I walked up to Unit 312. I crouched down, ducked my head beneath the half-open steel roll-up door, and stepped inside. The air inside the unit was shockingly cold, at least 20 degrees colder than the hallway, and carried a foul, suffocating odor of wet mildew, decaying paper, and burnt copper wiring. I reached out with a trembling hand, my fingers wrapping around the cold, heavy plastic of the receiver. I lifted it off its mechanical cradle and pressed it to my ear. Immediate static filled the ear cup, a harsh, rushing white noise that sounded like a freezing blizzard blowing through an iron pipe. "Hello?" I asked, my voice barely more than a cracked whisper. "Is someone there? Is this a joke?" The static instantly vanished. The silence on the line was absolute, so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the telephone's internal coils. Then, a voice came through the receiver. It wasn't human. It was flat, synthesized, and dry, sounding like an automated digital voice readout from an old military computer terminal, devoid of any pitch or emotion. "Subject Marcus," the voice rasped softly. "Heart rate, 114 beats per minute. Distance to surface exit, 142 meters. My breath hitched violently in my throat. I pulled the telephone receiver an inch away from my ear, staring at the faded beige plastic in absolute terror. The air in my lungs felt like ice water. "Who is this?" I breathed, my knuckles turning white around the handset. "How do you know my name?" "Step count recorded," the synthesized voice continued without a pause, ignoring my question entirely. 412 steps taken since entering Corridor B. Your heart rate is rising. Turn around, Marcus." I didn't answer. I slammed the heavy plastic receiver back onto its mechanical cradle with a loud clack. I scrambled backward out from under the half-open steel door of Unit 312, hitting my shoulder hard against the sharp bottom edge of the metal frame. Pain shot through my arm, but I barely felt it. I stumbled out into the hallway, spun on my heels, and looked down Corridor B. The corridor behind me was completely empty. The single emergency light overhead flickered violently, buzzed like an angry wasp, and died with a sharp pop. Absolute, impenetrable darkness swallowed the entire hallway in an instant. I couldn't see my own hand inches from my face. The darkness was so thick, it felt tangible, pressing against my eyes and skin. The cold concrete floor beneath my feet felt like it was shifting, losing its solid anchor. From inside Unit 312 behind me, the telephone indicator light started flashing red again in the dark. Not ringing this time, just pulsing rhythmically, casting a faint, crimson circle of light onto the concrete floor dust. And then, in the absolute blackness of Corridor B, I heard the sound. It was the heavy, unhurried sound of bare, wet feet dragging against the rough concrete floor, coming from the far end of the hallway, moving with terrifying certainty straight toward where I was standing. The digital voice didn't come from the telephone handset this time. It came from the dark air directly above my head, whispering softly down through the rusted metal ventilation grate in the ceiling. Step 413. Panic seized my chest like a vice. I didn't think. I just ran. I sprinted blind into the blackness of Corridor C, my hands outstretched in front of me to keep from slamming face first into the concrete walls or the edges of the steel doors. My heart was slamming against my sternum so hard, it felt like it would shatter my ribs. Every breath I pulled into my lungs tasted like old rust and freezing dampness. Behind me, the dragging they were matching my speed effortlessly in the dark, staying precisely 15 feet behind my back. Step 420. Step 430. The synthesized voice echoed from the ceiling vents above me as I ran, tracking my movement through the ventilation shafts like a predator tracking prey through a tunnel. I rounded a corner, my shoulders slamming hard into a steel corner post. I bounced off it, sprawling onto the cold concrete floor, scraping my palms raw. I scrambled back up onto my feet immediately, gasping for air, and saw a tiny sliver of green light up ahead. The emergency exit door. It was located at the end of Corridor A, lit by the faint green LED glow of an illuminated exit sign. Step 450, the voice whispered from the wall grate right next to my ear. I reached the heavy steel fire door and threw my entire body weight against the horizontal panic push bar. The bar depressed fully, but the door didn't open. It was magnetically locked from the outside. No! No, no! Open! Open! I screamed, hammering my bloody palms against the thick steel panel. I grabbed the small glass inspection window set into the top of the door and looked through, praying to see the concrete stairwell leading up to the street. There was no stairwell. Through the glass window, bathed in the eerie green light of the exit sign, was another endless corridor of orange steel doors. Corridor B. I hadn't been running toward the surface. The facility wasn't a grid. It was an impossible, looping spatial trap underneath the city. The dragging footsteps behind me slowed down, coming to a halt just around the dark corner of the hallway. The red light from Unit 312's phone was no longer flashing in the distance. Instead, the ambient darkness of the corridor began to bleed a pale, sickly gray light, illuminating the air with a faint, unnatural fog. From around the corner, a figure slowly stepped into view. It was impossibly tall, at least 7 feet high, and unnaturally thin. Its limbs were elongated, the elbows and knees bending at subtle, wrong angles that human joints could never make. It wore the faded, grease-stained navy blue uniform of a 1970s laundry plant worker. But the fabric was soaked through with black, oily water that dripped steadily onto the floor with a soft. Its face was completely smooth. It had no eyes, no nose, and no ears, only a flat expanse of pale gray wet skin. In the center of its featureless head was a single, rusted brass speaker grill, the exact circular earpiece of a vintage rotary telephone, embedded deep into the flesh. The speaker grill vibrated. The synthesized voice rasped out directly from its face, loud and clear in the tight hallway. Subject, Marcus. Total steps taken inside Unit 404 Facility, 500. Storage lease terms fulfilled. The creature raised one long, wet arm. Its fingers were unnaturally slender, ending in silver metal tips that looked like telephone wiring terminals. It reached out toward the green illuminated its metal-tipped fingers pierced the plastic casing of the exit light. The green glow died instantly, plunging us back into the oppressive gloom. Your belongings have been processed, the voice whispered, the sound now coming from all around me, vibrating through the concrete floor, the steel doors, and the air itself. Welcome to long-term storage. I backed as far as I could into the steel exit door, my spine pressed flat against the cold metal, watching as the towering figure took one slow, heavy step toward me. I closed my eyes, pulled my knees to my chest, and waited for the dark to take me. My eyes snapped open. A harsh, bright white light was blinding me. I raised my hand to shield my face, my heart racing, my breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. I wasn't in Corridor A. I wasn't trapped against the fire door. I was sitting on the overturned wooden crate inside Unit 404. In my right hand, I was still holding the plastic tape dispenser. The wardrobe box in front of me was only half sealed. Above my head, the single fluorescent tube was buzzing softly, casting its clean white light over my uncle's dusty boxes. I sat completely still for nearly 2 minutes, listening intently. Outside in the hallway, the facility's central ventilation system kicked on with its familiar, deep mechanical rumble, blowing a steady stream of dry air through the door vent. I let out a long, shaky breath, wiping a thick layer of cold sweat from my forehead. A dream, I whispered to myself, laughing nervously. Just a exhaustion-induced panic attack. I looked down at my phone resting on the edge of the wooden crate. The screen lit up, battery at 42%. The time read 11:42 p.m. I had only been sitting there for 5 minutes. Determined to leave immediately, I stood up, tossed the tape dispenser into an open bag, and stepped out of Unit 404. I grabbed the handle of the orange steel door, pulled it down hard against its tracks, and slid the heavy brass padlock through the metal latch. I locked it tight, shoved the key into my pocket, and turned around to head for the loading bay stairs. As I took my first step down Corridor D, my foot landed in something wet. I stopped and looked down at my sneaker. In the middle of the clean, dry concrete floor was a dark, oily puddle of black water, and stamped directly into the wet surface was a single, elongated footprint, bare, unnaturally long, leading from Corridor C straight toward my unit. My phone in my pocket vibrated once. With trembling fingers, I pulled the phone out. Facility monitoring system. Subject, Marcus. Step count reset to 0. Current location, basement level 2. New lease period commencing now. From deep down the dark, windowless expanse of Corridor B, behind the locked steel doors of the underground labyrinth, an old rotary telephone began to ring.